May 31, 2024, News Report 1. On May 31, 2024, the Chinese government announced the cancellation of tariffs on 134 Taiwanese products under the Economic Cooperation Framework Agreement, ECFA, achieving zero tariffs. However, this zero-tariff policy will end on June 15, returning to normal tariffs. The cancelled products include raw materials such as lubricant base oil, liquid paraffin, and liquid sorbitol, as well as intermediate goods and production equipment. Major end products include bicycles and golf equipment. Chen Binhua, a spokesperson for the Taiwan Affairs Office, stated that the ECFA was based on the 1992 consensus between the two sides of the strait. However, after Taiwan leader Lai Chih-cheng took office, he refused to acknowledge this consensus, inciting cross-strait confrontation and seriously undermining the basis for cross-strait negotiations. He pointed out that the so-called Taiwan independence remarks would only harm the interests of Taiwanese enterprises and people. The Chinese government's use of economic means to exert pressure has long been anticipated by the Taiwanese business community. Chen Baolang, chairman of Formosa Petrochemical Corporation, said they had been aware of the poor cross-strait relations for a long time. 60% of the company's base oil is exported to other countries, and they began diversifying their market to Vietnam, Malaysia, Thailand, and other countries 3 years ago. Therefore, the impact of China's tariff cancellation is minimal. A spokesperson for the Taiwan Presidential Palace stated that the government had made early preparations, and the overall risks were controllable. The government will accelerate the global layout of industries and provide support. Taiwan's Premier Zhou Rongtai stated that the government will protect the people and industries, and will protest through international channels at the right time. Mainland Affairs Council Chairman Chiu Chuizheng said that China's pressure on Taiwan would only distort the reciprocity of the ECFA, exacerbate economic and trade disputes between the two sides, and lead to decoupling. China's move will increase costs for Taiwanese companies and may lead to relocation to Southeast Asia for production. This measure will increase the cost of Taiwan's exports to China, possibly causing companies to be unprofitable. Some companies may choose to relocate to Southeast Asia, exacerbating the separation between the two sides. This economic coercion not only affects Taiwan but also other countries, possibly distorting bilateral relations and exacerbating differences between the two sides. News Report 2. According to Reuters, during the Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore on May 31, U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin and Chinese Minister of National Defense Dong Jun held sideline talks, which lasted for an hour and 10 minutes. Dong has been China's defense minister since December last year. In April this year, he had a video call with Austin, marking their first face-to-face substantive dialogue after a year and a half of suspension of military communication between the two countries' defense ministers. Pentagon spokesman Lade said in a statement after the meeting that Austin expressed concern about recent PLA activities in the Taiwan Strait, reiterating that China should not use the actions of the Taiwan government as an excuse for coercion. Austin told Dong that the U.S. will continue to fly and sail in the South China Sea within the limits of international law. Lade said the two sides also discussed China's support for Russia's defense industry, the situation on the Korean Peninsula, and other issues. Lade emphasized the importance of maintaining open military communication channels between the United States and China. Chinese Defense Ministry spokesman Wu Qian said after the meeting that the talks were positive, pragmatic, and constructive strategic communications. Wu also said that Dong told Austin that the U.S.'s behavior on the Taiwan issue seriously violated the One China principle, and the U.S. should not interfere in China's and Taiwan's affairs. The Biden administration has emphasized the importance of maintaining open communication channels, but each meeting between the U.S. and China officials has seen the U.S. pressuring China, and China has been very tough. As a result, each meeting has turned into an argument with virtually no results. During Chinese Foreign Minister Ma Chaoshu's visit to the United States, the Biden administration's attitude remained to keep communication channels open, but there was no compromise on key issues, with both sides expressing their positions and issuing policy notifications only when necessary. News Report 3. On May 31, the National Bureau of Statistics released data showing that the Purchasing Managers' Index, PMI, for the manufacturing sector in May was 49.5, falling below the boom-bust line for the second consecutive month, a decrease of 0.9 percentage points from the previous month and lower than the expected 50.5. The new orders index was 49.6, down 1.5 percentage points, indicating a slowdown in manufacturing demand. Specifically, the PMI for large enterprises was 50.7, up 0.4 percentage points, indicating that they have been in the expansion zone. The PMI for medium-sized enterprises was 49.4, down 1.3 percentage points, and the PMI for small enterprises was 46.7, down 3.6 percentage points, with a significant decline. This indicates that small and medium-sized enterprises are currently in a difficult situation, while large enterprises, mainly state-owned enterprises, are still expanding and monopolizing the market. The non-manufacturing PMI for May was 51.1, down 0.1 percentage points, falling for the second consecutive month. What does the decline in PMI reflect? This indicates that China's goal of driving economic growth through manufacturing, especially exports, has not been achieved. News Report 4. The Chinese Ministry of Commerce sent a lengthy letter to European Commission Vice President Dombrovskis expressing dissatisfaction with the EU's trade investigation and demanding that the EU abandon the investigation. In this 5-page letter, China warned the EU that if it does not abandon the investigation, it will face an imminent trade war. China also stated that it will investigate and crack down on the EU's aviation and agricultural industries, including Airbus in the aviation sector and products such as red wine in the agricultural sector. The European Commission, which was scheduled to announce the results of its anti-subsidy investigation into Chinese electric cars on June 4, postponed the announcement due to the impact of the European Parliament elections. The European Commission does not want to make taxing Chinese electric cars a campaign issue, so it has postponed the announcement to June 9. Politico Analysis pointed out that China is the third largest export destination for EU agricultural products, accounting for 6.4% of the total EU agricultural trade. A crackdown by China on EU agriculture could have a significant impact on the EU. In addition, China's harshest blow to the European aerospace industry may be not buying Airbus aircraft. However, this is not a cause for concern, as Chinese airlines still have more than 80 Boeing aircraft to be delivered, and China is also pushing for the development of its own C919 aircraft. Therefore, the likelihood of China buying Airbus aircraft in the short term is small. In terms of agricultural products, China is not the only market for the EU, so the EU is unlikely to give up its exports of agricultural products. News Report 5. Voice of America reported that Vietnam recently protested against China's deployment of the medical ship, Peace Ark, in the South China Sea. The Peace Ark is a ship used to accommodate, treat, and transport wounded personnel at sea. It belongs to the PLA Southern Theater Command, has a displacement of 4,000 tons, can carry a rescue helicopter, has more than 100 beds on board, and is equipped with medical equipment such as CT scanners. CCTV reported on May 21 that China had sent the Peace Ark medical ship to the Shisha Islands, circumnavigated the Shisha Islands by 1,000 kilometers, and stopped at some islands to provide medical services to Chinese soldiers. On May 23, Vietnamese Foreign Ministry Deputy Spokesperson Duan Cuyu, in response to questions from the Vietnam Youth newspaper, said that Vietnam resolutely opposes all activities that violate Vietnam's sovereignty. Stanford University researcher Powell said that this seems to be a formal protest by Vietnam, aimed at publicly responding to China's official message, indicating Vietnam's sovereignty over the Shisha Islands. China and Vietnam fought a naval battle in 1974 over the issue of sovereignty over the Shisha Islands, with China gaining full control of the Shisha Islands through that naval battle. At that time, Vietnam was in the midst of the North-South Civil War, and the Shisha Islands were controlled by South Vietnam. Unlike the Philippines, which is adjacent to China, Vietnam shares a border with China and is also a communist country, making the relationship between China and Vietnam quite delicate. Despite maintaining friendly relations on the surface, the two sides still have fierce disputes on some issues. News Report 6. Bloomberg reported that the U.S. Department of Commerce is slowing down the approval of NVIDIA and Intel's export of artificial intelligence chips to the Middle East to prevent these chips from falling into China's hands. The U.S. Department of Commerce announced a chip export ban last October, requiring U.S. companies to obtain permission from the Department of Commerce before exporting chips to more than 40 countries, including the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia. In recent years, the UAE and Saudi Arabia have imported a large number of artificial intelligence chips for the construction of data centers. However, the United States is concerned that these chips may be transferred to China. The report pointed out that the U.S. Department of Commerce is slowing down the approval process to give the government more time to formulate a comprehensive strategy. The U.S. Department of Commerce emphasized that protecting national security is the top priority and will conduct extensive due diligence on cutting-edge technology, while also striving to maintain partnerships with Middle Eastern countries and protect the technological ecosystem. The Department of Commerce requires tracking the ultimate users of artificial intelligence chips, which is indeed somewhat difficult unless the chips themselves have tracking mechanisms. The current issue is whether these chips have such tracking mechanisms. If the chips have such mechanisms, it is theoretically feasible but may affect the market acceptance of the chips. This also means that, although technically feasible, there are still challenges in practical applications. News Report 7. The Australian Strategic Policy Institute recently published a report entitled, "The Truth and Reality of China's Characteristics." The report points out that the Chinese government uses emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence, mobile games, and immersive technology to control and shape external perceptions of the CCP, thereby strengthening the Chinese government's legitimacy and increasing its influence in culture, technology, economy, and military affairs. The report mentioned that the Chinese government also uses these emerging technologies to collect user data, thereby gaining greater control over the global information system. For example, the popular mobile game Genshin Impact collects and generates user data, which is strategically valuable, so the game developer has received support from the CCP. In addition, Chinese e-commerce platforms like Tencent have also accumulated a large amount of user data and shared it with China's propaganda system. The report suggests that governments should require technology companies to thoroughly review their data supply chains to ensure that the companies and technologies in the supply chain are safe and transparent. At the same time, governments must formulate policies to regulate immersive and monitoring technologies to prevent these technologies from being used as political tools. News Report 8. According to Voice of America, the U.S. and British military said they carried out strikes on 130 targets of the Houthi armed forces in Yemen on May 30. The targets of the strikes include underground facilities, missile launchers, command and control stations, and Houthi armed boats, including drones. The purpose of this operation is to prevent the Houthi armed forces from further disrupting shipping in the Red Sea. The U.S. Maritime Administration stated that since November last year, the Houthi armed forces have launched more than 50 attacks on ships, including seizing and sinking ships, seriously threatening the safety of shipping in the Red Sea, causing many shipping companies to detour around the Cape of Good Hope in Africa, increasing transportation time and costs. Although the Houthi armed forces claimed in January this year that Russian and Chinese ships were not threatened in the Red Sea, in March they attacked a Chinese cruise ship named Huangpu. In May, the Houthi armed forces announced that they would expand the scope of their attacks to target all ships trading with Israel, regardless of their nationality. China's position on this issue appears to be complex. On the one hand, Zhang Jun, China's permanent representative to the United Nations, stated in a speech in February that the United Nations has never authorized military action in Yemen and accused the United States and Britain of disrupting global shipping. On the other hand, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, when meeting with Yemeni Foreign Minister Zandani on May 28, called for an end to the attacks on civilian ships and the maintenance of the safety of the shipping lanes in the Red Sea, indicating that China is willing to play a constructive role in this regard. China's position appears contradictory. China is an important user of the Red Sea shipping lane, and the interruption of Red Sea shipping has had a huge impact on China's trade and economy, leading to increased transportation costs. However, China also supports the position of the Houthi armed forces in some respects. This support is actually lifting a stone to hit one's own foot, as the actions of the Houthi armed forces directly affect China's shipping security and economic interests. China's foreign policy appears to be strongly anti-American, but it has paid a high price for this sentiment. News Report 9. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning stated at a routine press conference on May 31 that China will not participate in the Ukraine Peace Summit scheduled for mid-June in Switzerland. The Swiss Foreign Ministry had previously stated that invitations had been sent to more than 160 countries, including Chinese President Xi Jinping and U.S. President Biden. However, Mao Ning pointed out that China had 3 requirements for the Ukraine Peace Conference. First, the conference must be recognized by both Ukraine and Russia. Second, all parties must participate on an equal footing. And finally, all peace plans must be discussed equally. However, as Russia was not invited to this conference, there is a significant gap between this and China's requirements, making it difficult for China to participate. Mao Ning criticized the Peace Summit for being unable to play a substantive role and emphasized China's support for Russia's position. Additionally, another reason may be that China is unwilling to openly participate in this summit, as it would expose its support for Russia's position, which would not benefit the improvement of China's relations with Europe. In recent years, China has been hoping to strengthen its relations with Europe, but Europe's attitude towards China has not been friendly. If China were to reveal its close relationship with Russia at the summit, it could further damage its diplomatic relations with Europe. News Report 10. The controversial amendment to the Public Officials Election and Recall Act, proposed by the Kuomintang, has sparked controversy. The amendment has been criticized for setting up obstacles to maintain its own interests, making it harder to recall legislators. According to the amendment, legislators cannot be recalled if they have been in office for less than a year, and the number of affirmative votes for recall must exceed 1% of the total number of electorate in the constituency. DPP spokesperson Wu Zheng criticized the amendment for raising the difficulty of recall by more than 30%, making the right to recall almost impossible. He also pointed out that the Kuomintang's move is no different from Xi Jinping's self-extension of his term. The DPP can now request the Grand Justices to overturn the Kuomintang's legislation or initiate a recall before the third reading of the bill. The proposal of this amendment reminds people of the Kuomintang's behavior in the legislative process, which has been criticized as self-serving. With increasing international attention on political developments in Hong Kong and Taiwan, amendments involving elections and political rights may attract more attention and controversy. News Report 11. Radio Free Asia reported that on May 31, the Tiananmen Mothers sent an open letter to Chinese President Xi Jinping, calling for dialogue on the June 4 incident. The Tiananmen Mothers is a rights group composed of families of victims of the June 4 incident. The open letter stated that they cannot forget June 4, 35 years ago, when those vibrant lives were hit by evil bullets and crushed by tanks, such a cruel event in peaceful times in Beijing's Chang'an Street. The open letter also stated that the June 4 massacre is a historical responsibility that the Chinese government must face and be accountable to the people for. For 35 years, the Chinese government has remained silent, distorted the truth about the event, and disregarded the facts. The families of the victims cannot accept or tolerate this situation, and they urge the Chinese government to publish the list and number of the dead in the June 4 incident, provide corresponding compensation to the victims and their families, and hold those responsible for the event accountable. This year's open letter was signed by 114 families of the victims, once again expressing these demands. News Report 12. China Central Television reported that the China Securities Regulatory Commission announced on May 31 that it has imposed administrative penalties on Evergrande Group for bond fraud. Evergrande Group was fined 4.175 billion yuan and is required to pay immediately. This fine amount is equivalent to most of the company's cash, leading to Evergrande Group needing to go bankrupt and liquidate. Evergrande Group Chairman Su Jiayin was also fined the maximum penalty, totaling 47 million yuan, and is permanently banned from entering the securities market. The China Securities Regulatory Commission determined that Evergrande Group inflated its income from 2019 to 2020, violating relevant regulations. Previously, the Nanshan District Taxation Bureau in Shenzhen had announced that Evergrande Group was required to recover 7.52 million yuan in property tax. As of the end of 2023, Evergrande Group's total outstanding debt due was 297.8 billion yuan, and the expected amount of commercial paper was 205.1 billion yuan. Some critics believe that the purpose of this fine is to take away all the cash, and the common people will not get anything. News Report 13. Radio Free Asia reported that on May 31, the Tiananmen Mothers sent an open letter to Chinese President Xi Jinping, calling for dialogue on the June 4 incident. The Tiananmen Mothers is a rights group composed of families of victims of the June 4 incident. The open letter stated that they cannot forget June 4 35 years ago, when those vibrant lives were hit by evil bullets and crushed by tanks, such a cruel event in peaceful times in Beijing's Chang'an Street. The open letter also stated that the June 4 massacre is a historical responsibility that the Chinese government must face and be accountable to the people for. For 35 years, the Chinese government has remained silent, distorted the truth about the event, and disregarded the facts. The families of the victims cannot accept or tolerate this situation, and they urge the Chinese government to publish the list and number of the dead in the June 4 incident, provide corresponding compensation to the victims and their families, and hold those responsible for the event accountable. This year's open letter was signed by 114 families of the victims, once again expressing these demands. News Report 14. French radio station reported that on May 28, the French and Belgian police conducted a joint operation in the northern French city of Bordeaux, successfully recovering the stolen precious artifact, a colorful feather seaweed jar from the Jiajing period of the Ming dynasty. This artifact is estimated to be worth 20 million euros. The incident occurred on the night of April 20, when a thief broke into the Royal Museum of Mariemont in Belgium and stole this colorful feather seaweed jar. During the theft, the thief also damaged the lid of the jar and demanded a ransom of several million euros from the museum. On May 28, Belgian and French police launched a large-scale search operation, and 6 suspects have been arrested.